back to the Scare Guy Show, the official video podcast of thescareguy.com, where we as filmmakers talk about everything that's scary fun, from films to TV shows to events. It's the spookier side of the con guy. My name is Jim Fry. I'm a screenwriter and one of your horror hosts today. My other co-host is...
What's up, everybody? It's Cheeseman, screenwriter as well, and one of the Scare Guys.
All right, so this is the first full week after Halloween, and we have got your first look at a Christmas tree. Yes, we're talking Christmas. It's coming to theaters November 10th this year, and we all know the timeless story of It's a Wonderful Life. You know, we've all seen it. But what would Bedford Falls be like if George Bailey was tracking down a serial killer and there's a lot of blood and guts? It would be a lot like It's a Wonderful Knife. That's what it would be like. A crazy, fun new holiday horror film only in theaters on November 10th this year, 2023, streaming on Shudder and AMC Plus and everywhere you rent movies at a later date. And we are very excited today to be talking with the director of that film, Tyler MacIntyre. Welcome, Tyler.
Thanks so much for having me.
And also the writer and producer of the film, Michael Kennedy. Welcome to you, Michael.
Thanks, guys. Good to be here.
Oh, so glad to have you guys. Let me give everybody a really quick synopsis. A year after saving her town from a psychotic killer on Christmas Eve, Winnie Carruthers' life is less than wonderful. But when she wishes that she had never been born, she finds herself in a nightmare parallel universe and discovers that without her, things could be much, much worse. Now the killer is back, and she must team up with the town misfit to identify the killer and get back to her own reality. It's a Wonderful Life by way of Scream. And guys, I just got to say, this film, you are treading on a storyline and holiday that many, many fans hold dear. Where did this crazy idea come from? And are you worried at all about, I don't know what folks might say about playing with their favorite holiday?
No, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Christmas. I'm a huge fan of Christmas movies. Huge fan of horror movies, and I knew I always wanted to mix them together. In fact, after I did Freaky, my plan was to sit down and write a Christmas horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved making Freaky. I loved every aspect of that film, from writing it to being on set with Chris Landon.
And can I interrupt you just for a second? When you, for the folks who are listening and watching Freaky, the film starring Vince Vaughn that came out, was it last year?
2020.
2020, and it was a great film about, it's a body swap.
Yeah, it's a play on Freaky Friday.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure folks knew what we were talking about.
So so I had such a great time on that when I sat down to kind of brainstorm ideas for what a Christmas horror movie would look like for me, I immediately said, what if I crossed It's a Wonderful Life with a slasher movie? I just had so much fun doing it once. I was like, let's try to do it again. And I don't think people hold Christmas movies so dear that they don't like Christmas horror. In fact, I think what I hear mostly from people is that they want more of it, that we don't have enough of it. So I'm not worried. And anyone that gets mad, fuck them.
Merry Christmas.
That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah,
I mean, not making anyone mad, you're not doing it right. Is kind of how I feel anymore.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, when you make horror movies for a living, I mean, pissing people off is kind of part of the job description.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, it's not a beat for beat remake of It's a Wonderful Life with a couple of kills in it. It's
right.
Like, we definitely have a lot of respect for Frank Capra in that original movie. But like, I mean, even that guy, he made Arsenic and Old Lace, and that's like the OG horror comedy, So it's I think it's okay to take some of that.
Well, people need to remember how dark It's a Wonderful Life was originally.
Wonderful Life is so fucking dark. It's so dark. It literally is about a man who's suicidal.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we don't want to ruin anything, but I got to tell you, you guys did some really good, cool. I don't want to go there, but to ruin anything for the folks who are going to watch it. But you guys did some cool switches and some cool, heartwarming moments with playing a little bit with that. But all right, Luke.
Can you tell us a little more about the screenwriting process of it? Like where the idea, did we say exactly where the idea came from and how you went through the process to production?
I mean, so like I said, when I sat down and I was like, okay, what does It's a Wonderful Life look like as a horror movie? So I watched It's a Wonderful Life a couple times, and I had the same thought you did, being like, this is actually a really darker than I remembered as a kid. And it's it's a messed up movie. It really is a messed up movie. But I immediately sat down and said, okay, if I'm going to do this, obviously I'm not going to wait till the last 15 minutes of the movie for the otherworldly thing to happen. I was like, it's going to happen right away, as early as I can make it happen. Because you also forget that movie's so iconic. You forget that he's only in the alternate reality for about 15 or 20 minutes, and it's in the third act. So I sat down and just kind of started brainstorming what my story would be. I outlined a movie about a 17-year-old girl who stands in for George Bailey, what it looks like if she kills a killer and he comes back because she wishes herself out of existence. So, and I knew right away by doing that, I got to have a fun, almost 15-minute short film in the beginning of the movie. I also knew I got to play with what has since kind of become a trope where you have the opening scene and someone gets killed, and I immediately was like, oh, wait a minute, I get to kill a killer in the first 15 minutes, and I get to kind of have the villain get taken down while also the hero is the hero. And for me, it ended up being, what I really found with it is I was like, I get to see what happens in a slasher movie when the slasher movie is over. You know what I mean? It's like you never really get to explore what happens after someone kills somebody. You know, you forget that Laurie Strode, Sidney Prescott, Nancy Thompson, all these people, they kill somebody at the end of the day. And whether that person's good or bad, it's got to have some mental ramifications for the person that does the act. So I thought it was a really interesting way in to examine all this in a slasher movie that you don't normally get to examine.
Tyler, talk us a little bit about the quote unquote Christmas movies that influenced you growing up and how they may have played a part in forming this film.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely always gravitated towards like the darker Christmas stuff. Like I really liked like Gremlins was my favorite when I was a kid.
Amazing, yes.
You know, which has that like pitch black monologue by like Phoebe Cates about like, you know, discovering her dad and all that stuff. It's like a really you know, like really dark like horror film. And even like stuff like you know, like Home Alone, like that, you know, that movie is like borderline sadistic, you know, like, and you know,
not borderline, it's downright sadistic.
you know, and so I really you know, like Nightmare Before Christmas, stuff like that, like I really loved that, you know, things that kind of mixed the kind of more macabre things with very cheery Christmas stuff. And you know, like one of my favorites is the Richard Donner Scrooged, you know, which is like a flat out horror movie that happens to, you know, like star Bill Murray and have a bunch of Christmas in it, you know. And it's interesting to me that you know, I knew I always really liked Christmas movies. I think they're very rich setting for a film. And so you know, I knew that I wanted to make a Christmas movie at some point. And I'm glad that you know, once I started kind of directing movies and started doing more horror comedies, you know, I was keeping my eyes peeled. And then you know, Michael you know, had sent me this draft, and it was, you know, really interesting because it plays it pretty like it's a, you know, pretty roller coaster ride horror film, but then it plays it very or it ends up in this very uplifting place, which I thought was a kind of a fun challenge to try and make like a slasher movie that really has a very uplifting kind of ending to it, which isn't, you don't really get in a lot of slasher movies.
No.
Luke. Awesome. Yeah, so you have a great cast, obviously. Can you tell us a little bit about the casting process and how you got these stars?
For sure. Yeah.
Amazing cast. Yeah.
Yeah, we well, we sort of tried to build it around our lead, Jane Widdop, who plays Winnie. And so I'd seen them in Yellow Jackets, which is a show, and they have a really key part in that first season. And you know, so they were on a list of performers that I kind of was keeping tabs on. And then once they did like a read for us, they did this really great version of the scene where Winnie first kind of steps into this sort of nightmare reality. And they really like landed the emotion of it. But, you know, it's funny, you know, like got the comedy of it, got the character work, but like really you could very much follow them into this kind of magical sort of ask of the audience. And then we kind of like, you know, sort of looked at each other and we're like, yeah, I mean, that's it. And then we kind of built a lot of the young ensemble around kind of the energy that they were bringing, and then brought in you know, we did a big search for Bernie, who's kind of the other side of that coin, almost a co-lead. And their relationship is really the kind of the main kind of crux of the movie. and watched a lot of tapes, and then eventually found
Yeah.
Cloud, who brought it this very like kind of eccentric energy to it, and we just thought that they would work great together, and they really did. You know, once we got them into rehearsal, and you know, started to see kind of like the type of energies that were bouncing off them. A lot of the you know, the subtext in there that was on the you know, on the you know, kind of sweeter side was really sort of floating to the surface, and they had a lot of great ideas about how to kind of you know, get these different dimensions to the relationship, and that was a lot of fun to kind of do. And then, you know, being able to counterweight them with people like Joel McHale and Justin Long, like, you know, like Joel, you know, normally is a bit of a comedy heavyweight, you know, like he does a lot. He's very, you know, very much smart alecky kind of dude. And we were trying to ask him to be like, you know, no, you don't understand. You're the Hallmark dad, you know, and then you're gonna do, you know, and then he has like more dramatic scenes later, you know, and it was fun to kind of get him.
The bear broke him. Working on the show, the bear probably broke him into that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I just thought that I was going to be the guy that he was going to be yelling at, you know, just like he does in the bear, and turns out not. He's like, you know, the sweetest person in the world,
Yes.
and yeah, and he just sort of, you know, came in and worked really hard and set a great example for everyone, and a lot of the young cast very much looked up to him, and then Justin, like, you know, had a little bit less time than Joel on set, but had just, you know, like he's supposed to be this sort of, you know, large villain, you know, and our story, you know, but you know, kind of requires a bit of a more outlandish kind of take on it. But you know, he's a bit of like it's almost like a Hallmark villain, you know, who with his real estate scheme, and then all of a sudden that gets spurned and he starts just fucking killing people. You know, and that was a kind of a fun direction. And Justin's like a fire hose of great ideas, and it just becomes about like, you know, shaping it down to you know, fit in the box of what could be, you know, real in our film.
Yeah, I worked with him briefly on Drag Me to Hell. There was kind of like the end scene of that movie, and I was originally in it, but then they ended up going with an alternate ending. Like I played like the boyfriend of one of the onlookers or thing. And I remember meeting Justin very briefly, but he just seemed like a very focused actor and really kind of invest himself in the role.
Yeah, super focused, and this is a weird role to invest yourself in because he's so like you know, weirdly like conniving and stuff like that. But you know, but he brings a lot to it and just has a ton of ideas.
Awesome. Now, while we're still on the subject of him, can you tell us a little bit about like developing the costume? Because in horror, you know, the costume and the look of the killer is such a big aspect, and kind of creating something iconic that maybe people cosplay in the future. Can you tell us about the development of the killer costume?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that was definitely on our mind. Like Michael had sort of written into the script, like you know, the kind of the billowing sort of white cloak and like the sort of ornate knife and things like that. And then it became a bit of like, well, what does that mean exactly? Like, you know, if he's an angel, does he have wings? Like, what are we trying to do? And so we once we kind of figured out the general shape of him, we knew he needed to be kind of fast and lean, and like, you know, with some of the characters that ended up being kind of in the costume, we knew that he wasn't going to be like a big Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers sort of like slow and large slasher. He was going to be more of a lean and quick slasher. And once we sort of figured that out, then it became about like, well, you know, there's some interesting challenges because usually slashers are kind of dark colors because they hide in shadows and stuff. And we wanted to be like, okay, we're going to hide him against like white surfaces, like snow or like, you know, a white wall, and trying to figure out how we sort of design things around there. And we pulled a lot of references, but primarily from like tree toppers, you know, like those sort of like, you know, like Christmas tree toppers with their very like porcelain kind of looks and in the faces, and they have this very blank kind of stare to them, and we wanted something that really evoked that. And then so we did a lot of texture tests with Matea and Tiana, our costume designer and production designer, to kind of nail it down. And they figured out like a design of the knife where we could incorporate some of the wings, so it's a sort of winged kind of ornate handle. And but you know, just trying to refine a lot of what Michael had kind of put on the page for it.
Nice. Now, Michael, if you can talk a little bit, the one thing about this movie that just really struck me was it kind of like Scream, but even more so than Scream. It wasn't just straight horror. It had so much humor, like the humor and balancing humor and horror is such a hard thing to do. So many people do it and they just don't get there, you know, and it just like, it either comes off as like slapsticky, weird, but you guys kind of really did a great job of balancing that horror and heart. Like the heart of this movie really shone through. And so mixing horror, heart, and humor all together in one film, I tell you, that's a hard thing. Can you talk about the process of that?
Yeah, for me, none of the heart horror humor works if you don't have emotion. Which is hard, I guess. But for me, it all derives from the characters and the emotion. Working on Freaky with Chris Landon, the number one thing I learned from him while writing that script together was none of this matters if you don't care. And none of this matters if you don't ground these high concept, weird other worlds in a person with real problems and real situations. Um, you know, so for me, it balances itself out in a way if you're always thinking of Winnie's drive and emotional state first. But I also learned really quickly, like, there were times when I was writing Freaky where I'd have this really great joke, but it would sacrifice the tone of the scene. And so it's all about kind of killing your darlings in some ways too, to make sure the heart and emotion aren't sacrificed for the sake of like a joke that ultimately at the end of the day doesn't matter. So it's really just finding those tones. I think, like, for instance, the scene when Winnie finds that her brother's dead, there's a million jokes ran through my head in that moment, but it also is like, okay, what would she really be feeling here? And then it lets the story continue, and by the story continuing and moving on a train, you then get to have fun with it. So for me, it's all about what the emotional stakes are more than anything, and then everything else can come from that.
Now, like a question with kind of like writing or production. Now, a movie like this, I'm sure that references It's a Wonderful Life, or that's just horror itself, or has, kind of like some Christmas elements. Is there any kind of like Easter eggs as like people watch through over and over? They might catch like a character's name that references something from It's a Wonderful Life, or a horror movie character or actor, or just little things in the background people might not notice that gets kind of subtly put in there.
Winnie and Bernie refer to George and Clarence several times in the movie, so those are direct references to It's a Wonderful Life. Angel Falls is a play on Bedford Falls.
Yep.
We have some of those classic, there's a movie theater in the movie that's kind of like the movie house, but for me that was also a very character-based decision. I figured Bernie had a safe space in a movie theater. The green track or the pink tracksuit is the Easter Bunny in Christmas Story.
Yeah, that one was fantastic. I love that scene.
Yeah.
I don't want to wear it.
Yeah. Gail Prescott. I mean,
Yep.
come on. It's Catherine Isabel's character's name is Gail Prescott. The staircase sequence is my homage to Kevin. Cop car sequence in Scream 2. There's a lot of stuff running through the movie. In fact, there was probably more on the page that they had to be like, might be a little too much, Michael.
Yeah. There's some minor ones, like a lot of like the Bells of St. Mary's is like a movie that's on the marquee, and It's a Wonderful Life that's also on the marquee in one scene in our film, and like there's a couple of nods like here and there, but some of our references are things like like Back to the Future 2, like and so so like, we fold in a few little things here and there.
When we were watching it, all of us said right at that moment, we were like, Back in the Future 2, right there with the big W's. That was great.
W.
Yeah, and so it's just a question of like, we don't want to get too preoccupied with it, but there's some rewards there, if you're a big horror fan or a big movie fan in general.
Yeah, and we are bumping up towards the end of our time here. I do just real quick questions here. I noticed that in the trailer for the film, you give away the killer right there in the trailer. So this isn't like it's not necessarily a who done it. I mean, what were you guys thinking about giving away the killer right there in the trailer in this movie's? I guess the movie's not really about who that is, right?
Yeah, Michael could probably speak to the whodunitness of it, but like, I mean, personally, as a horror fan, like Scream was such a good movie that people think that like all slashers are whodunits just because of how good Scream is. Like in reality, they're not really. Like like the original Prom Night is like like it's more of a giallo trope. Like it's like more of an Agatha Christie thing, but then somehow like Scream was so good, people were like, oh, it's always like a whodunit, whereas it's usually not. Like the majority of the time before Scream was not. And so we just wanted to it's funny to kind of it's almost like the first 15 minutes or the end of a regular slasher movie, and then we get to kind of see some of the fallout of that, and then our movie starts really, and you can have a different type of fun.
Yeah, and we also knew like it almost, not that it didn't matter, but it was also, it's in the first 20 minutes of the movie, so you're not really spoiling it per se. You're selling
Right. Cool.
selling the premise more than anything.
All right. Oh, sorry.
I thought it was important to reveal that because it's Justin, quite frankly, too. And we wanted that moment in the trailer as well, where Winnie sees Justin for the first time after the wish, to really show people, oh, you know, this is what the movie is. It's not, you know, she's going to jump off a bridge and marry to collect $9,000. It's, there's a killer on the loose, and you physically have to like present both versions of this person to sell the stakes of the movie.
Yeah.
You know,
Cheeseman, what's your last question as we wrap up?
So yeah, it's, as a screenwriter, such like an interesting concept, and you know, there's so much room to play there. So seeing kind of the concept of the wishing and then what happens kind of with this, are you looking to maybe make more of these, or franchise? It could be like in a different kind of universe or setting, or continue the characters. Would that be something you guys might be interested in?
yeah, I mean, I have an idea that would follow up literally from them shutting the door. You would literally start the first scene on the other side. So like, be not even like Halloween. It would be like Halloween, where it literally picks up the second the movie ended.
Cool.
But yeah, I would love to play in this sandbox again and go a little bit bigger if we have some more money, which usually sequels you do. Yeah. And use some ideas that had to get cut for costs and stuff like that I had in the first movie that we just couldn't do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like we've only scratched the surface of what these movies could be. So yeah, I would love to do some more with this, and especially with some of the characters.
Tyler, are you on board?
Yeah, hey, you know, I mean, this is a lot of fun to do. I mean, I definitely think there's more to be mined out of there. You know,
Tyler would like twice as many days to make the movie.
I would like twice, you know, and you know, it will just pluralize everything. It's a Wonderful Knives.
Yeah.
Twice as many shooting days, and yeah, it's great. Twice the budget, you know, like twice the audience. You know,
I want
right. Well, we had a blast watching it. Michael and Tyler, real quick as we end, where can people follow you guys or find out about your projects and find out about the film?
You can follow me on Instagram at Michael TJ Kennedy. I post my dogs and horror movie stuff. So
sure. Right. And you can find me at TMAC Film on the site formerly known as Twitter, which I refuse to call X.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
The film is It's a Wonderful Knife, only in theaters on November 10th, 2023. That's just coming up real soon. It will stream on Shudder and AMC Plus afterwards, and everywhere you rent movies. Check it out. It's a fun film. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on the Scare Guy Show.
Awesome. Thanks so much.